Okay, let's unpack this. We've all been in that perfect meeting.
Oh, yeah.
The decision is presented, maybe the senior leader gives a quick nod, and then everyone around the table just agrees.
Right. It's fast. It's clean.
So efficient. You walk out feeling great, thinking, wow, what a great team. We're so aligned.
And that feeling,
Yeah.
that frictionless efficiency is exactly what we need to dive into today. Because we're exploring this really counterintuitive argument from researchers like Jonathan Westover.
Which is?
That the meeting where everyone agrees quickly is probably the most dangerous meeting you can have.
Dangerous. That's a strong word. Because it feels like the opposite of risk. It feels safe.
It feels like success on the surface, yeah. But the research shows that this apparent consensus, it often masks these huge critical vulnerabilities.
Like what? What are we talking about here?
We're talking about unchecked assumptions, deeply rooted power dynamics that are just squashing honest feedback, or a major deficit in what we call psychological safety.
So when you see everyone nodding, what you're really seeing is silence. It's not actually agreement.
That's it exactly. And so our mission today is to get past that surface level comfort. We want to explore the mechanisms and, frankly, the catastrophic real-world consequences of this dangerous consensus.
And then, most importantly, find the solutions. The evidence-based protocols that organizations, and you listening, can actually use to build in productive, healthy conflict.
To turn dissent into an asset. And the urgency for this it's just off the charts right now. You've got these three huge forces all colliding.
Okay.
First, just the accelerating complexity of everything. It means more blind spots, way more. Second, hybrid and remote work. All those little informal chats where you normally catch someone's hesitation.
The coffee machine conversation.
Gone, or at least much harder to come by. And finally, there's this growing awareness of psychological safety. We just can't afford to mistake fear for alignment anymore. Leaders are being held accountable for that silence.
Okay, so let's start with the basics then. The definitions. Because genuine consensus, when everyone actually gets on board after a debate, that's a good thing.
It's the goal.
So what's the dividing line? What makes it dangerous?
The core difference is whether the concerns were ever really aired and processed. Genuine consensus happens after the debate. Dangerous consensus is preemptive. It just conceals all the disagreements and skates right over the unexamined assumptions.
So it looks the same on the outside.
Identical. But the foundations are just completely different.
It sounds a lot like Irving Janis's classic work on groupthink. Self-censorship, the illusion that everyone's on the same page.
That is absolutely the foundation. And to really get the danger, we have to look at why people are agreeing. There's this crucial spectrum from the 1950s, Kelman's 3 C's of alignment. This is key.
The 3 C's. Okay, lay them out for us.
First, you have internalization. This is the gold standard. It's genuine belief. You've heard the arguments, you've weighed the evidence, and you truly buy in.
Right. That's what you want. That's resilient.
Exactly. Then the second one is identification. This is more about social affiliation. I agree, not because I'm 100% sold on the plan, but because I respect the leader who proposed it, or I just want to be part of the in-group.
I can see how that's fragile. If that leader leaves, if the group's status changes, your commitment just evaporates.
It just crumbles. But the real danger, the direct route to disaster, is the third C, compliance.
And that is?
Public agreement, masking total private disagreement. The person says yes in the room, but is thinking, this is a terrible idea the whole time. They've just calculated that saying no is too expensive for their career.
So dangerous consensus is almost always just compliance, or maybe some identification, which means those commitments are paper thin the second you hit a roadblock.
They're the first ones to say, see, I knew this was a bad idea. And that connects us directly to Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety.
Right. The idea that a team needs to feel safe for people to take risks, like challenging the boss.
Exactly. So if that safety isn't there, then what looks like consensus isn't intellectual alignment. It's just fear. That risk-reward calculation for the employee is completely broken.
And the data on this it's actually stunning. This is not some fringe problem. It's happening all the time.
It is endemic. There's research on Fortune 500 companies that found in a staggering 35% of major strategic decisions, senior executives admitted later that they held back important concerns.
35%. So 1 in 3 major corporate strategies is launched with known but hidden flaws,
Exactly. And it gets even worse in high-stakes fields.
like healthcare.
Absolutely. In surgical teams, studies showed junior members see a safety concern, a mistake, a breach in sterility, but they stay quiet in about 50% of those cases.
50%, half the time.
Half the time. In an environment where seconds can mean life or death, the necessary challenge is suppressed.
That data alone should be a flashing red light for anyone in a leadership position. If your team is always silent, it's not because you're a genius, it's because the system is broken.
Yes, the system is structured to reward silence.
So let's drill down into that. What are the drivers? I have to assume power dynamics are at the top of the list.
They are the dominant force, without a doubt. Steep power gradients, you see them in aviation, finance, the military. They create these huge incentives to just comply. As soon as a leader signals their preference early on,
It's game over.
it changes the whole calculus. Everyone knows challenging the boss's idea costs political capital, and the benefit of being right just doesn't seem worth that cost.
Okay, but what about the flip side? What about really close teams? You know, the ones with great chemistry where everyone likes each other. Surely they're better at this.
That's the great paradox here. Highly cohesive teams are often more vulnerable to groupthink
How's that possible?
because they become obsessed with maintaining harmony. Rocking the boat, challenging a core belief. It feels like a betrayal of the team's identity. So they prioritize feeling good together over being right together.
And then you just layer our own human biases on top of that. We're all wired for confirmation bias.
Right, which leads directly to this phenomenon called an information cascade.
Yeah.
Imagine the meeting. The first 2 or 3 people to speak are high status and they all agree.
Huh?
The fourth person, even if they have some really good contradictory data, starts to doubt themselves. They think, well, they must know something I don't. So they conform. And the cascade just builds from there, cementing a false consensus.
And as you mentioned, being on a Zoom call just makes all of this 10 times worse.
100 times worse.
Yeah.
You lose all those subtle, informal cues, the slight frown, the person leaning back in their chair. Initiating a direct challenge on a video call feels so much more confrontational and awkward. The system is just more brittle.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The actual organizational consequences. We're not talking about hurt feelings. We're talking about strategic disasters that cost billions and sometimes lives.
The performance data couldn't be clearer. Dissent makes for better decisions. One study found that projects where dissent was actively encouraged had 24% higher returns than projects that rushed to consensus.
24%. That's huge because the dissent acts like a stress test.
Exactly. It surfaces all the risks you didn't think of. And on the flip side, if you enforce consensus, you absolutely murder innovation.
Because no one wants to bring up a crazy idea.
Why would you? If you learn that suggesting something unconventional gets you penalized socially, you just stop. You stick to safe, incremental ideas. There's a study that found R&D teams with constructive conflict produced 31% more patentable innovations.
And we don't have to look far for the really catastrophic examples. The Columbia shuttle disaster is just the textbook case of what happens when compliance overrides safety.
It is. The investigation pointed right at the culture at NASA. Engineers had serious concerns about the foam strikes, but they felt their worries were just being dismissed or downplayed by management.
So the system didn't just fail to listen.
It failed to solicit and elevate those dissenting views with the force they deserved. The failure was a direct result of suppressed, compliance-driven dissent.
And in the corporate world, the disasters are maybe slower, but they're just as final. A company just falls off a cliff because they can't challenge their own success.
Oh, you see it everywhere. Blockbuster failing to pivot to streaming, Kodak completely missing the boat on digital photography even though they invented it. These weren't technology failures, they were culture failures.
The core business model was just too sacred to challenge.
Exactly. It was just too risky for anyone on the inside to seriously question it.
Let's pivot to the individual costs. Because the person who stays silent in that meeting, they pay a price too, don't they?
A huge price. It's a tax on their engagement, on their well-being. When you repeatedly see your valid concerns just get ignored, you enter a state of what psychologists call learned helplessness.
You just give up.
You learn that speaking up is pointless. And the research shows these employees have 23% lower engagement and 34% higher turnover intentions. You are literally paying people to mentally check out.
Wow. And for people in certain roles, safety, ethics, the cost is even higher. You mentioned moral injury. Can you define that for us?
Moral injury is. It's different from burnout. It's this profound psychological distress you get when you have to participate in or witness something that violates your own ethical code, and you feel powerless to stop it.
So a nurse who sees a safety risk but stays quiet, or an accountant who signs off on something they know is wrong.
That's moral injury. It's the pain of being forced into silence when your professional values are screaming at you to speak up.
Which brings us back to that central warning sign for every single leader listening.
Yes.
Silence in a meeting is never a sign of success.
Never. Silence is a data point. It is a warning sign that your people have done a toxic career calculus in their heads. They have decided that the personal risk of speaking up is greater than the organizational benefit of the truth.
So we can't just hope for heroes. We can't rely on spontaneous bravery. The research points to concrete, structured protocols.
Yes, you have to formalize dissent, make it part of the process. One of the simplest is the devil's advocate rotation. You just formally assign someone the job of challenging the plan.
So it's not personal, it's their job.
It completely removes the personal risk. It's not Joe being difficult, it's Joe doing his assigned role for this meeting.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate on that for a second. Doesn't that just become a token role? Everyone thinks, oh, it's just Joe doing his thing, and they ignore him.
That is the critical challenge, you're right. So the leader has to demand real substance. They have to treat the advocate's points with the same weight as the main proposal and show how that dissent actually shaped the final decision. Otherwise, yes, it fails.
Another powerful tool I've heard about is the pre-mortem.
The pre-mortem is brilliant, just brilliant. It uses this psychological trick of temporal framing. You don't ask what could go wrong. You say, okay, it's 6 months from now. The project has failed spectacularly. What happened?
So you're analyzing a past failure, not predicting a future one. It feels safer.
Much safer. It reframes the whole discussion, and the data shows it works. Pre-mortems have surfaced critical risks that traditional planning missed in 60% of cases.
Then there's something that sounds a bit more intense. Dialectical inquiry.
It is intense, but it's incredibly effective for huge decisions. Instead of one plan, you develop 2 or more competing plans based on totally different assumptions.
Like Plan A assumes the market stays the same. Plan B assumes a major disruption.
Exactly. You institutionalize the disagreement right from the start. You force the team to debate the assumptions so you don't fall in love with a single untested theory.
And the ultimate case study in making this work has to be the Pixar brain trust.
Oh, absolutely. The brain trust model is the perfect blend of radical candor and psychological safety. Directors present their unfinished films, and their peers give incredibly honest, sometimes brutal, feedback.
But there's a key structural piece that makes it safe, right?
This is the crucial part. The brain trust has zero authority to mandate changes. None. The feedback is purely advisory. The director is still in charge.
So it's not a critique that can get you fired or humiliate you. It's a gift of perspective from people you trust.
Precisely. It preserves creative authority, which is the key to safety in that context.
So it seems like all these great protocols, they still need a foundation of psychological safety to actually work.
They absolutely do. And that starts with leaders. They have to practice what we call vulnerability modeling. Admit their own mistakes, acknowledge when they don't have the answer, explicitly ask a junior person, what am I missing here?
And that's exactly what Google found in their big study, Project Aristotle.
It was their #1 finding out of everything they looked at. The single most important factor that separated high-performing teams from the rest was psychological safety. Not talent, not structure, safety. It led them to completely retrain their managers on how to be curious and how to solicit dissent.
So beyond culture, what about just redesigning the meeting itself? Little process tweaks to short-circuit the bias.
2 really simple high-impact changes. First, anonymous preliminary voting. Before anyone speaks, you collect initial opinions on a poll or a shared doc.
So you get the real distribution of views before the loudest person in the room can sway everyone.
You capture the truth before the cascade starts. The second one is delayed leader input. The boss, the senior decision maker, should not speak first. They should wait until everyone else has contributed.
To stop everyone from just converging on what they think the boss wants to hear.
You force a genuine exploration of ideas, not a race to please the leader. The aviation industry figured this out decades ago with their CRM program.
Crew resource management.
Right. They literally embedded it into regulations that the co-pilot is obligated to challenge the captain on safety issues. Dissent became a required, accountable part of the job.
And even for something like a nonprofit board, there are ways to build in this accountability.
Yeah, a great practice is requiring dissent documentation in the minutes, even if a vote is unanimous. It forces the board to ask, did we actually hear any dissenting views? And if not, why not? It creates an audit trail for candor.
So what does this all mean? When we wrap this all up, the central insight from this deep dive is that disagreement. When it's channeled thoughtfully, it's not friction. It is a critical strategic asset. And that comfort we feel from silence and quick agreement is costing organizations everything: innovation, returns, and sometimes tragically, human lives.
We have to move past that surface level relief of a quick yes. The organizations that are going to survive and thrive are the ones that build constructive challenge right into their DNA. They make sure the uncomfortable truths get heard before a decision is made, not after.
So here's our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to take away. Think about the last big decision your team made, the one where everyone got on board really quickly. And then ask yourself, or even better, ask your team anonymously, were any real concerns raised? And if not, what was it about our culture or our process that might have suppressed that dissent?
Because if the answer you get back is just silence, it's time to stop celebrating the efficiency of your meeting and start investigating the danger that's lurking right under the surface.
Thank you for diving deep with us. We'll talk to you next time.